The greatest power you possess is your ability to choose. Join Lowe's Moore as he reveals how you can begin to maximize that power by exploring yourself on the deepest levels and committing to making lasting and positive changes. Get ready to achieve breakthroughs that will lead to accelerated growth and transformation, because you are now tuned in to The Blueprint.
Why the actions contradict the lamb. I'm fellowshipping when I'm with the fam. That's more relations. That's forming a phone.
Wow. Like that intro?
I did.
That's a pretty awesome intro.
Well,
good evening, everybody. Welcome to Lowe's Moore and The Blueprint. And clearly you can see that Lowe's Moore is not in the building. Part of the reason Lowe's Moore is not in the building today is because he was in a basketball tournament down in Louisville, Kentucky, for the ages of 60 to 65-year-olds. Yeah, he still got game. I just want to let everybody know.
I was gonna say, why was he there?
Yeah, he still got game. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to be able to be his co-host today. He might log in today from the airport, but the sound there is a little bit more difficult. So we're going to do the best we can to make it work for him on tonight. So we're just excited about being able to be here. And tonight we have a special guest who happens to be with us right now today. But before we do that, I just wanted to give an introduction to let everybody know that the Blueprint is a vision that Lowe's has had for quite some time now. And when he did his book, From the Boys and Girls Club to the NBA, it says the Lowe's Moore Chronicles, Life on the Narrow Road. Denzel and Pauletta Washington had written the foreword in the book. And as they did, Pauletta said, hey, this is like a blueprint. A lot of people in the field of acting and entertainment should read this book. And it's written in a way that is so easy for people to connect with. And so I think sometimes people want to read books that have all these super large, words and is deep. But this book is just real. It hits you right in the heart and in the gut. So if you haven't, had an opportunity to get this book, I think it would be a great time to do so. Again, the Lowe's Moore Chronicles. Lowe's his vision was to be able to talk about the 7 spheres of influence, the lifestyle 7 spheres of influence. And so there's a specific playbook that he has. It addresses religion, relationship, family, education, government, law, media, business, and finance, as well as sports, arts, and entertainment. Wow, that's a lot. It just lets you know that that people of God have an opportunity to be part of these spheres on these 7 mountains and still function in their capacity as people of God. Yeah. I think that for years we've as people of God have been limited on what they thought they could do, but this is where it's letting you know that you've been given gifts and talents, and you can utilize those gifts and talents anywhere. Yeah. The scripture says that your gift will make room for you. And what?
Before great men.
And bring you before great men. Right. I knew you would know. I knew you would know the answer to that one, And so it would definitely bring you before great men. Absolutely. And so and I think the key word is great, right? Who's actually great?
How do we measure that?
Yeah, how do we measure that? And so sometimes a grade is a measurement that we place upon other people, or people will say LeBron James is great, or Michael Jordan is great. And so to identify whether you're great means that you're compared to somebody else who maybe is not so great. Is that
I think that,
yeah, not so. I don't know, but reality is, Lowe's always says, before you could change the outside, you have to change what's on the inside. So in this podcast, it expresses the power of communication and the importance of making it an effective and practical application. And so, the Blueprint airs every Sunday evening from 7 to 8:30. We've had some amazing guests. We're just about a little over a year in the production. And so it's been a pretty awesome experience. Usually Lowe's has his little ball, his little pebble that he drops. And he talks often about when he drops this, and I don't have it to drop today. He went away. Maybe he took it with him. Maybe he thought he was going to play. He said he stole it off of his Michael Jordan statue, and so he figures he could dunk on Michael Jordan with that ball. So maybe he took it with him to Louisville to give him some luck.
I like that face.
But what he talks about is that when he drops that pebble into water, like some people think that it's going to create a ripple effect.
Right.
And so when we're living our lives, the things that we say, the things that we do, have a ripple effect, and it impacts other people. So tonight, we're looking forward to having some ripple effects while we have our discussion today. This is a question and answer. It's interactive. So those of you out there in podcast land and on Facebook, I'm hoping that you're looking in and you're send us some message, talk to us, let us know how things are going, so that if you have any questions, this is definitely a different show for today, and I will explain to you why in a few minutes. But every year, Lowe's has a book of the week, and this week, his book of the week is Beyond Human by Justin Abraham. Beyond Human by Justin Abraham. And what I love about Lowe's when he pulls out a book is that Lowe's is a book reader. Like there have been times, we'll go to the mall, right? And so a lot of people go to the mall, and you might lose your husband in the sports store, or you lose him in the maybe restaurants,
right.
Different places like that, right? I lose my husband in the bookstore. I can never find him, and he's entrenched in the books, and so I'm sure if he has not already read Beyond Human, he'll digest it, and then I'll be on my way to North Carolina, and he'll say, "You know what Justin Abraham said?" I'm like, "No, Lowe's, I don't know," but he loves reading, and so I love it because reading is fundamental, but there is so much that you can gather in your expertise of communication with people when you read.
Absolutely.
So they say if you read to a baby while the baby's in the uterus, the baby begins to develop the reading, something about reading. There's something about it. So, I'm grateful that he does that. His key word for the day is perseverance. Great word. It's a great word. We want to persevere in everything that we do. Hill and Pierce Harper affirmation moment. It says, I will trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. That's Proverbs 3:5. And his music, he started this recently. His music, The Best of Morning Glory by Juanita Bynum.
Yeah.
Ooh, Juanita
that's a good one.
Her Morning Glories, Juanita can get you messed up in the Morning Glory. Yeah. I never really knew what Morning Glory was till I went to Woman Thou Art Loosed many years ago down in Georgia, the Georgia Dome.
Okay.
There were over 100,000 people, for Woman Thou Art Loosed, and we got there, and this woman gets up on the stage, and she's singing and singing and singing. I'm like, is there going to be preaching? What's going on here? What is she doing? But she was singing and worshiping and ushering the presence of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
It was the first time I experienced that, but once they unleashed me,
it was over after that.
Yeah. I'm a Morning Glory person.
Right.
I'm enjoying the Morning Glory. His movie for the week is Do You Believe? A great movie, Do You Believe? And if you haven't seen it, take some time and take a look at it. We love Christian movies. We love getting to the place and the understanding of what that is for us, and it's good. It's a good movie to see. There's a Blueprint shout out for birthdays this week, and one of them is going out to my BFF and your BFF, your mommy. Happy birthday to Lady Sheila Owens.
Love you, mommy.
She's that's my girl. We have grown up together since we were kids, and Sheila has just been an amazing, amazing friend and sister. Just want to remind everybody that next week on August 1st, next week, Lowe's is going to be inducted into the New York State Basketball Hall of Fame. Woo, 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 woo. New York State Basketball Hall of Fame. Pretty awesome. I'm excited about that. We are going to go up as a family. We're not sure whether the show next week is going to be on Saturday or whether there'll be a guest host on Sunday. Okay. So that's up to him to decide. And I'm sure he will. So with that being said, this is a pretty awesome day. I want to just kind of give a little bit of a backdrop into what we're doing today. And this backdrop is today we were supposed to have Pastor Jeffrey Wheeler, who is going to be our guest. And so I'm asking everybody to just send special prayers to Pastor Wheeler and his family as they're going through something right now, that they solicit your prayers. So, and so I know it's just something that we don't normally do on the show, but I'm just going to say right now, dear Heavenly Father, we just ask right now in your name that where our Pastor Wheeler is, where his family is, that you provide your miracle working power, because only you can do it, Lord, only you. And so we know what they need. You know every hair on the head of his family member. You know everything that he desires. But we ask that you just strengthen them and strengthen the hands of the doctors, steady the hands of the doctors at this very moment. God, we know that you're a miracle working God. You did it before, and we know that you will do it again because you are just that awesome. And so we ask that you comfort and strengthen them and bring his family through everything that they're going through, and just give them a testimony that's greater than any other testimony they've ever experienced before. So we just say thank you, thank you, thank you. In Jesus' name. I know I just needed to pray. I really needed to pray, for them right now, because truly God is good. Wow, this is what we're going to do now. Before I give you the full introduction of our guest today, who instead of doing something that we normally do, which is the guest is on the phone, our guest today is actually sitting right here next to me. And I mean, the level of excitement that I have is just really unbelievable. So I'm going to, I think we have a clip or something that we want to show and so just to introduce her. And we're going to ask that be done right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the retreat again. As you may know by now, I'm your host, Danielle Amaris Owens. Yes, it is pronounced Amaris. Don't ask my parents, though. They kind of still argue about how to pronounce my middle name. Anywho, listen, you all, I am so excited about today's topic. We are going to talk about the 3 levels of pain. Yes, I know. There's dozens of measurements of pain, but specifically, I want to discuss some of those mental and emotional pains, and I want to divide them up into 3 different levels. And for the sake of this conversation and this teaching and this grand revelation that I have received about this, we're going to call today's episode Paper Cut, Gut Punch, and Heartbreak. Yes, you heard that right. Paper Cut, Gut Punch, and Heartbreak. And we're just going to dive right into it. So, yes, I received this grand revelation about pain, again, strictly talking about emotional and mental, and how it relates in these 3 categories. I spent a lot of time kind of writing it down, and, as the Lord was dealing with me about it, it really opened my eyes to a lot. And not just the pain itself, but also the recovery and the outcome of these certain instances. So let's just dive right in. Let's just talk about, let's use the physical pain of each of these dimensions, and we'll just walk it through. Y'all know a lot. I'm always 100% unscripted. So this will be interesting. All right. So paper cut.
Wow. It kind of froze on us a little bit. I don't know if it froze out there in blueprint land,
right?
But it froze a little bit for us. But tell us, I want to introduce everyone to my amazing, shall I say, our amazing goddaughter. I think I only have 2 goddaughters, but I'm so excited about being able to be here with you today, Danielle Amaris Owens It should have been Danielle Patrice
I agree.
Owens. I think it has a really nice sound.
I think it has a nice sound too.
But I know you have lots of godmothers, so I'm sure your Aunt Sharon and your Aunt Sherry and all of those, they would all feel a little something about Patrice. But
I think they would
Patrice,
understand.
yeah. Anyway, everybody, I want to introduce you again to Danielle and Maris Owens. Danielle, welcome to the Blueprint.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor it is to participate in this. I can't even tell you. I'm speechless to be here. So I'm happy. I'm really happy. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being a part. Truly, it's been a pleasure watching you grow up over the years and doing all the amazing things that you've done.
Thank you.
And so I'm not sure how much of Uncle O's show that you've seen before, and maybe one or two shows here or there. But in his shows, one of the things that we do is we often talk about family. We talk about family. We talk about faith. We talk about different experiences that folks have. And so, being that I've known you before you were born, but talk a little bit about your family. Talk about who are the Owenses? Because I feel like you guys could have like a sitcom, of faith. Because let me just be real clear. There are many times that they show shows on TV about people of faith, right? And I think sometimes maybe it's that people say maybe it's true, maybe it's this, but sometimes is that really what spiritual families are all about? Can you tell me a little bit about the Owens family, your family?
Yeah, so I don't watch a lot of shows about church families and reality shows about church families because from my experience in the industry, in the entertainment world, yes, the foundation of it is reality, but a lot of that is manipulated for ratings and things of that sort. When it comes to my family, though, so my parents have been together 30 plus years. It's four of us. Oh, look at them. They're so cute. Aging backwards, starting to look, the kids are starting to look old and they starting to look younger. So, but one thing I can say about my family, so I'm the only girl. It's all boys. And I feel like our family dynamic is very special in the sense that the children all have very, very, very different personalities. And so we've always joked growing up, my siblings and I, my brothers and I, about who's the favorite, because our personalities are so different. It was very evident that we were treated differently and had to understand and accept that the love was the same. It was just different. And I think that parents
but
have
you
a
know
hard
who the
time.
favorite is now, right?
AJ. He's everybody's favorite though. So he's my favorite. He's his parents' favorite. He's, the grandparents' favorite. He's everybody's favorite. He's the baby. So, and he's a lovable kid anyway. But I think the beauty about my family, and if I can just brag on my family for a second, because I truly attest all of my growth, my maturity, my morality to my upbringing and the fact that my parents they were very transparent with us about everything. They didn't hold any hunches, and their love was so unconditional until when their kids did mess up and did make mistakes. There was never a question as to whether, the love had changed over our shortcomings. I've been, I done been locked up. I've had instances where I was at very, very low points, and to hurt my family or to feel like I brought disappointment to my father, who's a bishop, to my mother, who is the wife of this bishop, who has this wonderful church, and their reputation and their character and all that they have built. These children of theirs have done some crazy things. And so it's always been that challenge of like, has their disappointment in us affected their love for us? And I can honestly say, if anything, it has grown. If anything, it has been more prevalent and has shown more in our shortcomings, where we maybe held shame and thought that it would distance us. And it's like the Bible says, when it comes to the love of God, what can separate us?
Right.
Our parents reflected that, because where we thought that the shame and the mistakes that we made would divide us or cause division between us, it actually brought us closer and it allowed us to see what unconditional love really was.
Wow.
So now when we talk about the love of God, we have an example in our home, and we don't. I know I speak for all of my siblings when I say we do not take that for granted at all. So it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. I'm honored. I'm privileged to have the parents, to have the love, and not only just the parents, but the village, to have you and Uncle Ozzy, to have my other godparents, to have the community and the people.
And you got preaching godparents.
All of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preaching godparents. You got an anointing on you.
Yeah. I got it. It's not fair.
Favor ain't fair, baby.
It's not fair at all. But just to know that my parents entrusted some of the most beautiful people on earth to be a part of our lives and to instill in us and to pour into us. Because one thing about my dad, and again, this just goes through the family dynamic, as a bishop, he's very careful of who he allows to preach on his pulpit. And he always used to say, I can spend 8 months teaching the congregation one thing, and in a 30-minute sermon, somebody else can come on my pulpit and mess up everything that I've spent the last year building. And I feel like that's the same with how he picked the people in his children's lives, how he picked the relationships that were ordained and that he allowed to be a part of his kids and a part of his family line. It's the same thing. It's like, I don't want anybody pouring into my children that do not respect or do not share the same beliefs.
That's why godparents are important.
And you can't just ask anybody. It's a trend now. It's the cool thing to do, but the role and the responsibility of a godparent is not one to be taken lightly.
I think about when you say that, I have, a lot of godchildren, mostly sons, because I'm just really like a boy thing, And I think about Jamal. Jamal.
Yes.
And so Jamal was our first godchild.
Uh-huh.
And so this week, and we another shout out, even though we don't have the picture to go up, but this week Jamal passed his New York State registered nurses.
Wow.
So he is now an official RN. And just talking about it makes me want to cry. I'm so very proud of him. He just melts my heart. I just adore him. My godson DJ lives out in California, and he's into acting, and he just got married with less than a year. And so when I think about my godsons, my godchildren, I do want to play a special role. My godson Travis just got his degree mailed to him this year. My godson Mikey graduated from elementary school this year. So like I'm just having like godparent goose pimples.
The secondary parent. You share that. Of course.
And my godson Tristan, he's doing his. So everybody's doing their thing. But my goddaughter Tamara is in Georgia, and she's married. Tamara is just my heart. So I'm just grateful. So yes, you just can't put anybody in your lives.
Right.
So you've got to be real clear about that.
Right.
Talk about education. This is another key sphere of influence. So talk about your education, how you were prepared for the things that you had to live in life and from an academic standpoint.
Yeah. So I was a scholar all through grade school, top of my class, all the way through high school. And when I graduated high school, I was like, I don't want to do this no more. I worked too hard, and I took a few years off, and I pursued a career in modeling that was very lucrative for me. It was very
look at my baby. My baby, y'all.
Look at that. Y'all did not play. But I realized very, very quickly. So the modeling industry, it's like it's a flash in the pan. If you're a Naomi Campbell, shout out to my girl. If you're a Naomi Campbell, if you're an Iman, if you're a big name, you think about these big name models against the hundreds of thousands of people who have modeled or women who have modeled, and very few of them have longevity in the industry. And I just knew I was going to be one of them. But God had other plans. And I shortly, very soon in my career, found out that if I were going to be able to sustain any type of financial support for myself, then I could not just model. Like at the time that I was in the industry, Black women, it wasn't Black girl magic. It was the more exotic looking. And so my stint in modeling was short lived, though it was lucrative. And I think what happened was that reality of like, you have to have something to fall back on. Even though my parents told me all the time, like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Right. I was like, no, this is my life. Like, I'm going to put every egg in this basket because it's going to work out. But when it didn't work out the way that I envisioned, I had to go back to school. And I had to figure out, that reality kind of set in like, well, what do you want to do? And it was like, all my eggs were in modeling. So now I don't know. But it came down to me trying different things, going through different programs, and finally settling for not settling, but kind of finding my place in a degree in business administration, where I was like, oh, I'm a boss. So I can take everything that I've learned, every influence, every network that I've ever built, and now I can take the academia of it, and now take all that I've learned with my, my feet, my hands to the plow and my feet on the concrete, and now put the academia behind it and begin to pursue a life that's more suitable for me, still walking in purpose, still building. But could I have done that without a degree? Maybe. But it was like, why run that risk again? I went through the whole let this work without this, and I realized that didn't work. So it was like, what harm could it do to get my degree? I can gain more than I can lose. So I went through an accelerated bachelor's program at Concordia College.
Concordia. Didi graduated from Concordia.
Oh, I love Concordia.
And so did Chelsea.
Yes, my boo. Hey, Chels. Yes, I went through an accelerated program, and in a year and a half, I was able to attain my bachelor's degree in business administration. I'm searching now for a master's in MBA because, one, it was fun, and I never thought it was going to be fun. But two, there is a level or a sense of accomplishment. There's a certain confidence that comes with having an education. And that's not to say that everybody has to have it, but there is something that comes with it. It's something beyond just a skill set. It's a network. It's a, feeling justified in your various, backgrounds and programs. Even now as a manager running, hotels, I'm realizing that my network and my background and the business degree that I attained really helps to push me and not just push, but accelerate me into a career path that I didn't see before. I had never planned for this. I was never going to go to school. I was at the top of my class all through high school. That should mean something. And it was like, that means nothing. That means nothing at all. So
if you had to do it again though, would you do it the same exact way where you went directly to modeling and then the academia, or would you have done the academia and modeling simultaneously?
I don't regret a thing.
Okay.
I don't regret a thing. And the reason why I say that is because there's so much pressure to have everything figured out. And the beauty in not knowing is that the glory of God can be found in the areas where you are unsure. And I think that we live in a society, and we're a part of a generation now that if you don't have the answers, and I'm glad that we're talking about mental health, it feels like you're losing your mind if you don't have everything figured out.
Yes.
And so because I didn't know, or because I had my own way of doing things, would I change anything? No, because the struggles, the hardships, everything that came with making my mistakes is the beauty of the makings of me, and everything that I had attached to shame and guilt and regret at one point is now everything that God is using to push me to be who I am and to develop into the woman He has called me to be. So I have no regrets. Not one. No.
I always used to say to Isaiah, it's not when you get your degree, is that you get it.
Of course.
If it takes you 10 or 15 years, because the one thing about education is nobody can take it from you.
Absolutely.
They can take your modeling, they can take your singing, they can take your acting. They can't take your education.
No, they cannot.
Your education is what you invest in yourself.
Yes.
And so, so that is awesome. I'm glad that you were able to have both of those experiences. Now talk a little bit about your faith.
Oh my goodness. I'm like smitten because I love God so much. He's like my whole world. And he has been the constant in my life. And I think sometimes it's repetitive and it's something that we hear, in church and when people testify. But when it is your example and when it is your experience, my faith is everything. I often tell my dad, I get invited to podcasts all the time. And a lot of times, believe it or not, I get invited to more secular podcasts where God is not the focus than I do, on a church related platform or a religious platform. And I used to always tell my dad, I'm like, Dad, how do I talk about this without sounding churchy? And he encouraged me so good the last time I had to do a secular podcast. And he was like, you are your faith. It is in you. There is no separating. There is no trying to figure out how to cultivate a conversation where you don't sound a certain way. It is everything that is in you. And I was like, you know what? That's the boldness. That's the reassurance that I needed, because there's nothing that I have, nothing that I've accomplished, nothing that I've grown to know. I've never done anything in my own strength. Everything goes back to God. Everything that I've accomplished is to the glory of God. Everything that I've done, everything that I've experienced is because God ordained for it. And so my faith is my life. It's what keeps me grounded. It is what, even in my darkest and the times of my life when I struggled with mental health and I struggled with what was going on in my head, he was my friend. He was my all in all. And I'm not ashamed about it. I'm not, I don't take it from him. I don't. Yeah, no. It is everything to me. And I think that it, again, like we were talking about earlier about how, what can separate us from the love of God, my life and all of its, I don't want to say tragedies, but my life and all of its crazy moments and instances that are not, that, a couple years ago I would have never publicly spoken about. It was in those very moments, more so than in the grand moments and the moments that I'm proud of, that I realized just how important and how much he loved me.
Here's the thing. I think that people have often said, I love the Lord, right? And when there's a revelatory experience,
yes, ma'am,
and the love becomes out of your mouth and it actually pours into your body, you feel there's such a connection. And sometimes I was listening to my pastor and he said sometimes it's your pain, it's in your deepest, darkest place that you find his love. And because you're like, am I alone here? I mean,
broken and contrite.
I'm like, what is anybody else go through this?
Right.
One of my favorite scriptures is 1 Corinthians 10:13, right? And it just does something to me every time I hear it. My pastor in Troy used to say it all the time, right? It says, there hath no temptation you take you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, and he will not suffer you to be tempted above that which you are able, but will with the temptation make a way of escape that you might be able to bear it. And I always think about, all the things that I've gone through, and I'm like, man, he's made a way in my deepest, darkest place.
When there seemed to be no way.
When there seemed to be no way.
When you said it was no way. When you said this was it.
When people said it was, they're like, oh yeah, she's down now.
That's it. It's over.
Oh yeah,
she's done. Count it out.
What's gonna happen to her now?
There you go.
She's not gonna make it.
Right.
He's not gonna make it.
Been there.
I remember when Lowe's, when he was at the end of his basketball career, and he was struggling, right? He was struggling. And, he was used to being cheered for, right? He was used to being cheered for. And then all of a sudden, he's coming off the bench and he's not playing. And that was a hard thing, right? But I want to let you know that he came home and these two little creatures would meet him at the door, right? And they would crawl up his arms and they made him feel like he was the most amazing, and he is and was and is. And so he learned how to get his cheers at home.
Of course.
When that was something, man. So Uncle Lowe's just sent a question. He said, did you see, I think it says, did you see ministry in you? What does it say? It says, did you see ministry in you? And how's it going? Because I want you to tell me a little bit about It's Her Time while you're answering that question, because I know ministry is in you.
Did I see ministry in me, and how's it going? No, and still don't. Because if it were up to me, I would live a very quiet, peaceable life, all alone, with hopefully a husband and some kids, and just sit in the back pew at somebody's church, and that'd be it. I never saw ministry in me. I never wanted it. I never wanted it. And anybody that's close to me will know this part of my testimony and know that it's nothing but my obedience to God that I am being shaped and molded into who He has called me to be. Because if it were my decision, I would not. I don't. I've never desired it. I've never wanted it. I've never. I knew at a very young age, watching my father in ministry, that there was a responsibility and it was a very restricted life in comparison to everything that I grew up seeing outside of my home.
Right.
So I never wanted it. I never wanted the pressure of being in ministry. I never wanted to preach. I never wanted to teach. I never wanted to do anything more than maybe sing on the choir because I love singing. But ministry, no.
And you're a PK.
Yes.
You know, what is a PK? Tell the people in the world a PK. What does that mean?
All right.
And how has that impacted you over the years?
All right. So I always say this whenever somebody talks about PK and stuff like that. Everything you've ever heard about PKs is true. It's true. We are the worst children. And we're the worst children because we're no different than anybody else's kids, but the microscope has always been on us.
Tell what PK stands for those
PK stands for preacher's kid. And there's always been this this notation that preacher's kids are the worst. You know, they're the most ill-behaved children. They're the most wayward children. Every rumor you've heard, every negative rumor that has ever been associated with a PK is true. I feel like most PKs, most, I can't say for all, are rebellious because of the pressures and because of the microscope that has been placed upon them because of who their parents are.
Right.
You know, I remember growing up, one of the most confusing things that I dealt with growing up was because my father was a bishop, because he had all these kids and I was the only girl, people just automatically was like, oh, she's so spoiled. She's this, she's that. She gets away with everything. And I'm like,
you know, Sheila.
Right. And I used to hear that so much and I heard it. And then I would be like, why would people say that so matter of factly? And yet when I go home, they treat me like one of the boys. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't get away with jack. And that's not to say that I wasn't loved or adored. I was.
Absolutely.
But I did not ever feel like what people were saying about me was ever true. And that was very confusing because I didn't have a voice as a young person to be like, hey, stop saying that. That's not right. It was always like, this is what you're projecting upon me, but it's not my reality. And so I grew up confused because now I'm fighting for a love that feels like it would be better than the love that I'm getting. And so I became rebellious because I'm hearing people say you should be, you know, spoiled and I'm sure you get everything and you have your parents wrapped around your finger and your brothers this and that. And I'm just like, no, that's not it. So now you hear it enough where you're like, well, why don't you spoil me? Why don't you treat me like everybody treats me? And it makes me feel like the love that I'm getting is not enough because of everything that everyone said. And so my parents can tell you, we had this conversation maybe 2 years ago where I had to have a sit down with both my mom and my dad. And I had to confess to them all the things that I felt growing up. And it was so healing and it was so, it was, I feel like a new person after that because there were so many things as a child because I was a PK, because of people's projections upon me, because of the rebellious nature that I had, because I was a PK and because I was the only girl, because I was in church every Sunday, sometimes during the week, but all day Sunday that by the time I'm going to high school and I'm going to middle school and I'm dealing with kids whose parents don't make them go to church or who don't know anything about God at all, it was confusing. It was difficult to kind of maneuver around, and I became very rebellious because of that. And I just feel like there's a lot of things that PKs go through that if you're not a PK, or if you've never sat down and had a relationship, and that's another thing too. You have people that will forge relationships with the PKs or with the children of the bishop for gain, trying to get close to the pastor, trying to feel a part of something that they see in their eyes as being grand and something worth getting close to, and they abuse the relationship that they build with the PKs. Or you have people that put the PKs on such a pedestal because of who their parents are, that there's a disconnect within the relationship because you feel like, well, I can't talk about this with this one. I can't get close to them. So it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing because I grew up always questioning every relationship in my life.
Well, so with that being said, you've had some place, and one of the things I had shared with you when I called you, I said, the church has been remiss in some cases, and I think that we're getting better, especially because of the pandemic, with really dealing with some of the nuts and bolts in reference to mental health and mental illness. And you always say, well, let's just pray, let's lay hands on them, let's pray over them. And I'm not saying that doesn't work, right? But let's take a deep dive and I asked you, I asked you for a reason. I admire you. I admire your strength and I admire your courage. And I always say that you have a story to tell that's healing, and could be a breakthrough for so many people. I know you shared it at our church not long ago, and and I'm just so proud of who you are as a woman, and that I tell you that all the time. But if you would be so willing to just kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and how your tragedy turned to triumph, how your trials got you to another place, and I always tell people that sometimes it's our worst place that brings out the best in us.
Oh, absolutely.
So
sometimes you can't get the best without getting the worst. It's the precursor for the best part of your life. You have to go through something, and it's funny. It's funny that we're talking about this because I was just having this conversation yesterday with a dear friend of mine. And I feel like the church has done a disservice up until before the pandemic, because we saw a rise and we were all at home dealing with, our minds, and a drastic change in our routine and in our lives. And it didn't just affect the preacher. It didn't just affect the one who didn't want to say anything or the one who made it obvious that something wasn't right in their head. So we thought that this is the measure of mental health because someone is borderline psychotic and that's all we know. So anytime someone says that they have mental health issues, it's like, oh, you're crazy. No, let's talk about it for a second. And I think that it's very important to have this conversation in church because at the height of my mental torment, I was in ministry. So I love God. I'm preaching his word. And I'm literally, I say this all the time. And this is not to boast or brag about anything that God is doing in my life. But I was preaching all up and down the East Coast, invitations all over the US. And I would preach my heart out on any platform and get back to my hotel room or get back to my home and could not sleep, being tormented, feeling like I was worthless, but I'm preaching the gospel and not knowing who to turn to because church has always said, when you come to God, he is the mind regulator. He is this, he is that. And it's like, yeah, he is. But what happens when I need the mind regulator? You're telling me who he is, but tell me how he is. You know what I'm saying? You're telling me who he is as a person, but I need to know his person. I need that relationship, and I need to see the evidence of this mind regulator without feeling judged and without feeling like I'm in sin because I am depressed.
Wow.
And I'm feeling anxious, and I'm hearing things, and I'm listening to the voice of the enemy that's telling me things that are so polar opposite to God's word. And I'm struggling to grasp the reality because even though God's word says this, and this is what I preach, and this is what I believe, when the enemy comes and tells me I'm worthless and I'm always going to be alone and I'm alone, it's like, help me understand. Like, because what he's saying is not that it's not true, but it is false. Something can be not true, and not be false at the same time. It just may be the moment and the position that we're in, So my journey is one that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, and it's taboo, but I think the great thing about what God has done in my life is that he has given me the confidence and the boldness to talk about the things that are taboo, unashamed. So I had been feeling depressed, probably in my teenage years. And I thought that it was normal because I had gone through a couple transitions. We moved. I was starting to work. I was starting to develop as a woman. I was starting to, kind of create my own world, branch out. I'm maturing and my responsibilities are changing and, things are just happening. And now God is using me, God is doing a great thing in my life and I'm preaching and remember, before I was in ministry, I was a video girl. I was doing New York Fashion Week. I'm doing print modeling, and so my life did a complete 180 very fast.
You're so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It did a 180 very fast, and there was a certain world and certain following that I had outside of church that now I have to transition into church for. That was difficult. That was very difficult because the way people in the world viewed me, now I'm coming to the church and I'm on the pulpit getting ready to preach, and people in the congregation like, who qualified her? Like, right. She was just in a music video. Who gave her a mic? Like, and I had to deal with that too. But I was so in love with God because.
But you were actually now. Let's go back.
Yeah,
you were actually on your mountain of sphere of influence.
Yes.
Not
Very
even
so.
realizing
Yeah.
that because sometimes when you get to those places and then people begin to see the God in you, right? Because the reality is some people will only see God by what they see in you.
Yeah.
Right. The Bible says, let your light so shine, right? That men might see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven, right? And so the reality is, there was some, even though you were going through some stuff, there was some good works in there and people saw that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was, I'm sure there's some prophetic people that probably saw that in you,
but there
and spoke it out and said, hey,
let me tell you, part of my testimony, the night I got locked up, and I say that very loosely because it happened. It ain't no secret. I'm not ashamed. Again, all a part of the makings of who God has called me to be. I'll never forget the night I got locked up. I got arrested for drinking and driving in New York City. I was hosting at the time, he was one of the biggest hip hop stars in the world. And that was Rick Ross and MMG and Meek Mill and all of that. And I was hosting a party for them. I had started doing party promoting in New York City. And the night I got arrested, I was leaving the party and it was just a regular traffic stop. Just so happened that I was drinking. I remember going to Manhattan Criminal Court, which is known as the Tombs. And from the time I got arrested when they took me to the precinct, the woman police officer that arrested me and had me in the cell said, normally what we do is you sit here and when the truck comes, they transport you from the precinct to Manhattan Criminal Court where you go before a judge. You get passed on all the way through. This one lady who was on duty, patrol duty, was like, there's something about you. I'm taking you. I'm not waiting for anybody else to show up. I'm going to take you myself. I don't know what it is. I got to cover you.
Wow.
Police officer. When she took me to the point where she could no longer be with me anymore, and this is when they were placing me in the holding cell in Manhattan Criminal Court. It is called the Tombs for a reason. It is demonic. It is dirty. It will make you lose your mind. You
were like the prodigal son. You were down to eat the slop
the whole time. And my rebellious self was like, I know this is a lie. Like, why am I here? Why is this me? Why am I here? I remember the woman that was supposed to, and I've experienced violations as a child. I remember right before they put you in the cell, they have to pat you down. And it's not a regular pat down like at the airport. I mean, they're going to touch you. Mm-hmm. And I remember I'm watching the women go before me. I'm in this line and I'm like, I don't want nobody touching my breast. I don't want them touching my legs. I don't want them touching me. And I just remember this grip of fear coming in. I'm like, God, please, like, I don't want to go through this. And I got up to the woman officer and she looked at me and she said, there's something about you. Ooh. She said, I'm not going to touch you. Just do me a favor. Shake your shirt, shake your skirt. I did that. She never laid a hand on me. She said, go right on in. I had just said, God, please. I'm looking at the way they're touching these women and violating them. Criminals. We're criminals. They don't care about us. We are criminals at this point. And even when I left, my public defender was like, these cases are we have 10 million of them a day. Nobody gets away with this, but there's something about you. My whole entire process for a year and a half, people fought for me. People covered me. And at the end, no charge. No, nothing on my record, nothing.
Somebody in Blueprint land ought to say, Amen. Hallelujah. We ought to see some hallelujahs on that Blueprint screen in a few minutes, because that is a testimony.
I'm telling you. And through all of that, and this is the beauty of who God is, and all of that, my attitude still wasn't right. I still felt like, why me? Why me? Not because I was actually drinking and driving, and I should have been there. I was so rebellious and so prideful about the whole situation that even when God was making a way for me, I still didn't see it at that moment. It wasn't until everything was said and done that I was like, how? One of my best friends went through the same thing and on probation and paying all this money and has a breathalyzer in their car. And I'm like, because I lived at home with my parents, every car registered to my address was supposed to have a breathalyzer in it. That's embarrassing. My father's a bishop. So you mean when he pulls out from the church, he has to blow in a breathalyzer so he can pull off and start his car? And all these things, God just really made a way out of no way and kind of like singled it in on me to show me his love for me. It's not that I wasn't supposed to go through the things that I went through. It wasn't. The mercy of God is just that. It's being guilty and him withholding the charge from you and paying your way.
Yes.
And that's what I went through because I was guilty. I should have had to go through that. I should have been 30 days in jail. What I blew, if I told y'all what I blew, I should be behind bars in Alcoholics Anonymous.
But you know what, though? You know what they could have done, though? It probably saved your life. Because if you were driving, you could have either hurt somebody else.
I just lost my best friend in that car accident.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like the devastation and what that would have done to me mentally and all. I mean, I could have died, but I could have survived and killed somebody else. Or I could have gotten to an accident, survived, and had to live with this devastation and this trauma for the rest of my life. There's so many things that God saved me from. And not only did he just save me from the worst, he spared me for what I deserved. And that's the part that always resonates with me, because as rebellious as I was and as prideful as I was when I was going through it, God still was like, until you get it, I'm still going to save you.
And that was just one thing.
One thing. Okay. One thing.
Well, we have a young lady backstage, and I'm just going to ask her to join in. Crystal, come on and join us. Crystal, is Crystal Fullward. Crystal lives in Georgia. Crystal, where do you live right now?
I live in Arlington, Virginia now.
In Virginia. So Crystal is a young lady that's very good friends with my daughter and my son-in-law. And I've watched Crystal over the years really grow and mature. And one of the things a couple of years ago, I went to a conference down in Tennessee. I go to these conferences every year. They're called NatCon, and Crystal's like, "You go to NatCon?" And I found out that Crystal had done some training in mental health counseling and things like that, and is also a young lady that's been in the Lord and knows who know the Lord. And Crystal, can you share a little bit about your experience and about your mental health experience and your faith, and how that has caused you to grow and to mature? And maybe if you have a question for Danielle, I think that would be a great opportunity to also introduce Crystal and Danielle.
Yeah.
Hey, girl.
Hey. So first of all, thank you so much for thinking of me. Where can I start? So yes, a lot of people who know me know of my journey with in my experience with mental health. Back in 2000, And so what's interesting, let me just say this. About 2015, I believe, I had like this, I felt like God was leading me in a way to do more and talk more about mental health. I had decided to start this organization called Flawed. And what it was a space for women to accept themselves and to heal. And so I started this organization, and it was actually getting pretty popular. We were doing these pop-up events, and you came and you spoke.
Yes, that's right, baby.
There's a clip on my Facebook page. I got the receipt. And you came and you spoke, and it was just amazing, right? And then, so that happened in about, I think it was December 2015. 2016, something started to happen with me. My mental health started to decline. But here's the thing, because I didn't know what those signs and symptoms were, or because no one knew what those signs and symptoms were that were around me, they didn't actually know what was happening to me, right? So it was just like, I mean, I would talk to Michelle at that time almost every day. And something was just starting to happen to me. And in February 2016, I was released from my job as an esthetician. And I was like one of the top estheticians at the time. I had no idea it was coming, but there was something that was going on. I lost motivation to work and to pray and to do all the things. And so I lost my job because of it. Fast forward a couple of months, in October or September, I started to contemplate and consider suicide. And I thought I was going to take pills. And I honestly can't tell you anything magical happened, right? I can't tell you that a light came shining through my window, or, or someone bust into the space. It wasn't anything. It was very gentle. It was a pause. And I didn't do anything. But the next day, I ended up talking to a few people about my experience and saying like, hey, it got bad. Like, I really considered suicide. And I was given tips based on their experience. Like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe you should pray a little bit more, or, you should just change the things that you want to change. But I had one friend at the time who was also trained and understood this is an actual problem. And she suggested that I go to the emergency room, but I'm not going to no emergency room. Even though I was talking to people about mental health and I was helping women connect to where they needed to be, I'm not doing it, okay? Like, I was just so stubborn. But over the days, I started to not plan anymore, but I would wake up and not want to be alive. I would wake up and wish that I didn't. And so I finally did decide to go to the emergency room about a couple of weeks later, ended up going into a psychiatric hospital for 5 days. And when I came out, I was determined to start having more conversations about mental health, about some symptoms and signs, so that people can know what exactly is going on, so that they can get the support that they need. And I didn't have no money. Listen, I mean, if y'all remember just a couple minutes ago, I told y'all I lost my job. So I was staying on my friend's couch at the time. I had no money. But I saw this mental health first aid instructor class. So I submitted my application. They said, yeah, you can get in here, but you need to submit the money in 2 days by the end of the weekend. I'm like, oh God, it's $3,000. I ain't got no money. And so I decided to do a GoFundMe. And shout out to my community who paid for me in like 36 hours. I raised enough money to go and to become a mental health first aid instructor. And from there, I became a national instructor as well. And one of the things that has been the hardest is getting back to God after the diagnosis. It has been the biggest struggle, because though I talk about it often, it was a different ball game when it was like, now it's me, now it's my mind. It's like, what do I trust? Can I even trust my thoughts? Can I even trust God? I'm upset. Like, come on, God. Like, you could have passed that. I had a lot of other things happen in my life. You didn't have to do me like that. Or so I thought. But it was all honestly now for his purpose, for his glory, right? Because now I help with other women with mental health for a huge organization. And that to me is just like what it was all about. Like all those things happen just so that I can get here. And so that's a little bit about it.
Crystal, that is awesome. And I appreciate your candor because I think it's really important for us to hear. And I'm going to let Danielle just respond to you, though, on that.
Oh, so I can relate. I also had my bouts with suicide. I had suicidal thoughts that I was ashamed to tell people about. And they got so bad until I was like, I don't see the purpose of living. So I actually did lock myself in a hotel room for 3 days with sleeping pills, with alcohol, and with other medication. And nobody but God, because Unisim has 100 pills. By the time I left on my third day, I counted, there was only 21 left. And on top of that, the Benadryl, the prescription meds and all of that, it had a physical effect on my body, but it didn't take me out. But I agree. There was a time where I was like, God, like, I can't even do this right. The fact that I wasn't successful in suicide made me more depressed, because it's like, what's happening here? Like, why do you allow me to keep going through this torment? Like, even when I wanted to end it, and I knew it was the wrong thing. I knew it wasn't right, but I had given up my will to live and to keep going. And I think one of the things that you said that was so profound, it was, you said, I realized it was for the glory of God that I had to go through it. One of the things that the Lord told me even before I went through it was that what makes you qualified to speak is your experience. And so now I'm in a place where I realize everything that I went through, it's so that I'm qualified. I'm not just talking because I read a whole bunch of books and people are like, yeah, you may know the terminology, you may know the academics behind it, but have you gone through it?
So you're like, I'm not just the hair, I'm the president of the hair.
Okay.
Like,
I mean,
it's like,
it really does matter when you're relatable. It really does matter. And understanding that not all depression or anxiety or any other mental health challenge or diagnosis is the same, right? But it's more like, I have been there. I know how it is to be in a very dark place. I know how it is to question God, to feel like, he's either not there or there, but not doing what he should be doing. And just being in that space and being really honest about that.
Yeah.
Well, there are also pastors who've suicided, right?
Many.
And they talk about that two of the highest professions where suicide occurs are pastors and psychiatrists.
Yeah.
And so you think about sometimes when you're a pastor or you're a psychiatrist, people pour into you their issues, right? And so they pour their pain into you, and eventually you become a fountain of other people's pain, other people's trauma. And so, if you don't have, and that's why it's important that you as pastors or leaders in ministry, that you should always have somebody, that you can pour into, because if you don't, you end up holding on to a lot of stuff. And yes, you can go to God, but sometimes God gives you mentors. It gives you somebody that you can talk to help you to get through this. And I think, as Crystal said, Crystal, I think it's important that even in the ministry, in church ministries, they should actually have people who have mental health first aid training. We have first aid training if a person gets a cut, right? If a person falls and breaks their leg, we don't put oil on them and lay hands on them. We take them to get a cast, right? Yeah. And so when I remember one time, a friend of mine called me up and they said, I have this person, they're having a problem and I've been trying to deal with them. And in the midst of dealing with them, they're not responding. They're not responding. What should I do? I said, take him to the hospital.
Right.
And they were like, what? I said, all the praying in the world, they're at a place right now that all you're going to be doing is spending time trying to get them to the place that you're not able to take them to. Right. It doesn't mean God can't, and it doesn't mean you. So these things come by fasting and praying. Yeah. Right. But at the same time, this is I remember one time I was dealing with a person who was going through, and everybody was like, oh, they were speaking demonic. And I remember the person was dealing with me. I was dealing with them, and their response was, you can't handle me. And they did it in a voice like that and said, get away from me, and I said, what my response was, you're right. I can't deal with you, but I know a God who can. Amen. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I stepped out, and in the midst of me dealing with it, I said to the nurse, give me the needle, right? The medication. And the person who was going through turned around and said, you gonna give me a needle? I was like, oh, all of a sudden you could talk normal? Right. Right. Sometimes you just got to keep it real. Right. And so I'm just letting you know, what we've gone through in the ministries and the churches, what you two ladies have talked about. There are so many people in the ministry that are going through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we just have to continue, to be open and to be transparent and to share.
Yeah. And I think that it's weird that it's just coming out now, and it hasn't been a part of the history of the church, because all through scripture, some of the greatest leaders, they didn't call it mental health. They didn't call it, what the scientific names that we have today, but they were distressed. They were brokenhearted. And these are the greatest leaders. This was Elijah after, he had shown up, before the prophets of Baal. He went into a pit and said, I'd rather die. But you just allowed God to use you in a way that was so incredible, that was miraculous, that gave glory to God, that showed who God was. And right after that, right after you came out of that moment, you were depressed and ready to end it all. The Psalms are full of David speaking and writing letters laced in depression. And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about how some of the greatest leaders, and not only that, I feel like anytime you deal with people, anytime you deal with helping others, there's always going to be an attack on your mind, on your emotions, on everything that you go through. And it's more common than I think that the church wants to talk about. I think the church has been like, God is everything. And if you are truly walking with God, this shouldn't happen. And that's not true. In fact, it happens more so the closer you get with God.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So,
well, Crystal, I want to thank you for coming on, and especially because it was a last minute call. But you keep doing what you're doing as far as working. And I'm not sure whether you're in Arlington and if you're part of a church family there, but if you are, they should know what your gift is, and make sure that the people in your ministry, in your church, understand that they have somebody that they can go to. And yes, I want you to pray, but I also want you to know that it is okay to be a mental health professional and to still be in church. It is okay to be an addiction professional and still be in the church. It's okay to be able to do these things and be in the church, because this is your sphere of influence, and people should be able to be, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people in the church, make fun and say, oh yeah, but they want to go to a psychiatrist and they want to go to this, and, and they make people feel bad because they have to go get help. And we need to stop making people feel bad because they wanted to see a psychiatrist. They still want to come to church and hear about Jesus, but they may still need to see a psychiatrist or a social worker.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is over the years, as I've been teaching and hearing more about people's experiences and just thoughts around mental health, is that I feel like there's this misconception and a lack of trust. There's a disbelief, right? I think that people believe that other people can just change their mind and be okay. Right? It's not, it's they don't see mental health as a disability. Right. They see it as a choice, and it's not. And the minute that we really start to be intentional about being more compassionate and understanding that this is indeed an illness and it is a disability that can affect people's lives and how they carry out satisfying relationships, how they show up for work and in their communities, how they even interact with God, right? When we know that to be true, that this is a disruption, and we trust that, then we will start leading with more love and more compassion and more empathy. But until we get to that place, there will always be these things where if I'm down and out, you think that I can just snap it off. Whether you say that to me or not, it's a belief. So we have to start to change our belief.
Wow. Awesome. Crystal, I love you, girl. And
I love
I don't
you.
know, I don't know what happened to that little girl that I used to see coming around with you. She done turned into a woman, you know.
Yes,
But well, it is awesome. You've done a great job. So hopefully
thank
we'll see
you.
you when you come back up to New
Yes,
York soon. I love you so much.
absolutely. Bye, you
I'm very
guys. Thank
proud
you
of
for
you.
having me.
Nice meeting
Bye.
you.
Thank you. So Danielle,
Yes, ma'am. Thank
continue to be proud of you.
you.
What do you tell somebody today who is listening to us, who might be going through some of these same things, whether they be young, whether they be older, whatever? What do you say to somebody right now? They go to church, they're struggling, they don't want anybody in the church to know what's going on with them. What do you tell them, and what do you tell the pastors or the leaders at the church?
So for anybody that's going through feelings of depression, anxiety, suicide, um, the first thing that I want them to know is that they are not alone. And it is such a taboo thing, but so many people, and some people don't know how to articulate it.
Mm,
Some people have accepted their confusion or their inability to make decisions, their um, them doubting themselves, them having, you know, these pressures of life. Um, you're not alone. You are not strange. You are not um, you are not weird. You are not to be cast away because of how you
mm,
feel. Um, you're not alone. It is very, very common, especially if you're in church. And and it's okay that you're going through these things because it's nothing but an indication that God is going to do something or a setup for God to do something. Whether that's God leading you to a therapist, whether that's God handing you deliverance by his own hand with no one else around. There is a way out. That's the most
yes.
important thing, to understand that it is not the end. It feels like the end. The enemy will convince you that this is the end. People will convince you that is the end, and there's nothing that can be done about it. But it's not the end. I think for pastors, I think we need to be more diligent. Um, for leaders in ministry in general, we need to be more open, honest, and transparent, because even our leaders, if they can be transparent and if they felt like it would be well received, I am sure that they have had seasons in their lives where they have been down and out, depressed, maybe not suicidal, but thought about what life would be like if things were different, or if they had not done, or if they were not here. I think that, again, this is not new.
Mm,
All through scripture, even Christ himself, right before he was getting ready to fulfill the promise of God, and that was to die for the sins of the world. This great man that we love to preach about, this great deity, this he is God, right? But he himself said, it's getting ready to happen. I know why I'm here. And his human side said, Lord,
if
if
it
it be
be
your
your
will,
will, remove this cup.
remove this cup far from me.
Mm,
He's talking to the Father. He knew why he was there. And in a moment of humanity, he questioned everything that was getting ready to happen. Fear, all of the human emotions that we experience anytime we're doing something for God. And I often say this, if I could leave with one thing, because this is the revelation that God just gave me yesterday. The thing about walking with God, and this is going to really, really, really challenge a lot of what preachers and leaders, especially those with huge followings, are preaching today. And that is, when we do anything that satisfies our mind, our soul, our body, it 9 times out of 10, it is not the will of God. We have made the gospel very glamorous when it is gruesome.
mm,
Our nature is sinful. So when God asks you to do something that doesn't feel good, it's still the right thing to do. It goes against everything that feels good to us. That's why when we talk about carnality versus our spirituality, we have to really understand that they are polar opposite, they are contradicting to one another, and they will always clash. Which is why when we do the right thing sometime, or when God is calling us to something, we feel like we're losing our mind. because our natural self, our natural being, our mind, will, body, emotions will always want to do what satisfies us. But God is not here to satisfy our emotions. He's there to get the purpose and the will of God out of our lives. But because our nature is sinful and He is righteous, doing what's righteous is painful. It's painful to the body, and it makes you feel insane because your mind has a hard time fathoming what is righteous, because it's easy. Let's put it down. Let's break it down to scripture, right? When Jesus was going about ministering to the people, someone came up to him and said, "You're talking about forgiveness, right?" He said, "Well, how many times should I forgive somebody? 7 times? Because 7 is a lot."
That was a lot. And he said,
"You're talking about
what did he say?
70 times 7.
70 times 7.
And he said, he presented the number 7. He said 7 times, as if that was like the cutoff, the max. And Jesus said it's endless. For us as humans and for us as believers, it is very difficult sometimes. And if I could just leave with a testimony, I had a situation, and I'm going to be very transparent. I've never spoken about this publicly. I had a situation with a friend of mine that I loved with all of my heart, mind, and soul. This person betrayed me, talked about me and my family like a dog. I have never experienced pain or heartbreak like I did in that broken relationship. So much so that even when I tried to pray about it, I tried to do the right thing, I tried to bring it before God, everything in me would rile up in anger, to the point where in the middle of a prayer, I would just stop praying about it because I felt like I was being a hypocrite. Don't you know, my love for God, my ability, my mind space to be able to see, God, I want to please you in everything that I do, even though I'm hurting, even though I'm broken, even though I'm brokenhearted. I'll never forget one day I was at work, and if Apostle Bailey is listening, he can attest to this. One day I'm at work, and it was as if God himself was sitting right next to me, and he said, "Call her." And I was like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not calling." For what? What am I calling? I don't have nothing to say to this person, because my nature and my way of dealing with things is, if you hurt me, if you betray me, if you make me feel uncomfortable, if you hurt me in any way, I'm not going to talk about you. I'm not going to run your name through the dirt. I don't seek revenge. I don't seek vengeance. You go your way, leave me alone. We don't have to. If I saw you in the street, I'd act like I never knew you. That's the best way I know how to deal with things. And the Lord was like, "You call her and you apologize." And I said, "I won't do it. I'm not going to do it." It wasn't even a question. I'm like, "I'm not doing it." The Lord kept saying to me, I'm at work trying to get my work done, and I'm literally hearing the voice of God as if he's right next to me. "Call her and apologize." I'm like, "God, no, I love you, but no, I'm not doing it. You want me to call the person that hurt me, that talked about my family? It's one thing to talk about me and make me go through it. You took my family through the dirt.
Right.
I'm not doing it." The Lord said to me, "If you love me, you will call her." And I instantly, you talk about feeling like you're losing your mind.
Oh God.
Aunt Tracy, I started crying. I was hyperventilating, and I said, "Lord, I'm about to cry now," because that's how real it was. I literally was like, "God, how can you measure my love for you by making me go to the person that did the most heinous things to me, and you want me to apologize?" It brings tears to my eyes, because he was relentless with it. He made me feel like it was a matter of life and death. He said, "You call and you apologize." And I was like, I can't. I'm literally like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. He said, "If you love me, you will." I said, "Lord, why would you measure my love for you by this? This is the most hurtful thing. And you know what she did to me." He said, "Because if you love me, you will keep my commandments." Jesus. When I tell you, I picked up that phone and I was like, I didn't even think I had the child's number in my phone. I'm calling around asking everybody, "You got her number? You got her number? I got to call her right now." And don't you know, crying, shaking, it went against, when I tell you I felt like I was losing my mind.
This is good.
I felt like I was losing my mind. Like, God is telling me to do something. And everybody around me that knew the situation, there wasn't a lot of people that knew. They were like, girl, you justified. Don't speak to her. I would never. People were like, I would never talk to her again. I would never. Yo, girl,
I know exactly what you're going
I'm like, right? Because I would never do that to somebody. Somebody did that to me unwarranted. You know what I'm saying? And so I felt justified in being very deliberate and very matter-of-factly about, I would never speak to this person again. I love her, wish her the best. Just don't want her around me.
And how did this happen?
I called an apostle or one of my mentors, and I was crying, and he rebuked the spirit of schizophrenia off of me because he knew I was going out of my mind in that moment, but all for the righteousness of God. Because in my natural nature, I was justified. She hurt me, of course. Why would I talk to her again? Why would I want to talk? Why would I want to be friends? Why would I want to
receive your apology?
Not only did she receive my apology, she apologized, and not only that, my entire life changed.
And healing took place.
Healing took place in my mind, body, soul. At the time, I was struggling at the job that I was at. Don't you know? The next day, I got a call for another job. My finances began to flourish. I was being held up because of my unforgiveness.
Well, you know, now it says that your offense with somebody else, an offense can cause you to miss your blessing.
Yes.
Right. And it's so crazy because as you were speaking, God was revealing to me something very similar. You know, and there was a situation where, you know, these individuals had done something in reference to my family, and I got really upset, and I openly said, I will never speak to them again.
Yep.
Here I am, a preacher, right?
Yeah.
I'll never speak to them again. I don't even want them to hug me. I don't want them to touch me. Nothing.
Don't talk
right?
to my family. If somebody brought up their name,
I was in church.
Check that.
I was standing. I was standing in front of the altar. I mean, in front of the altar, and Elder Clayton started singing, "I surrender all to you, everything I give to you." Here's occurred, withholding nothing, right? And I'm going, wait a minute, and I had my hands up. And God said, put your hands down.
Because you don't mean it. And
I said, what do you mean? He said, you're withholding. You're withholding grudge. You're withholding anger. And I was like, I don't care. And I did exactly like you. I'm hearing you and it's ministering to me. And God was like, put your hands down. And I was like, I was trying to put my hands back up. And he said, until you release it, you can't put your hands up.
Absolutely.
And I sat there and I sobbed.
Oh, like a crazy person. Like,
and everybody's like, it's just a song.
Right.
But it was doing something to me.
Yeah.
And like you said, it released me. And I want to let you know that I was thinking about when you were talking about the suicide, right? That sometimes it's not just about suicide, but it's about some of the things that lead up to it.
Yeah.
Right. There are a lot of things that people go through on a regular basis. So you've got to peel the onion, right?
Yes.
What happens when you peel the onion?
You get to the root of it.
But what happens when you peel a regular onion?
Oh, you cry.
You cry.
Yes.
Right. So you got to peel the onion, and sometimes you got to release the pain. You got to release the tears. You got to release the emotion, you know. And so what is it that is in the root of that onion? You know, and it's a lot of things. Depression just doesn't come out of nowhere. There's something that it's connected to. And yes, it could be a chemical imbalance, but usually if the chemical imbalance is also triggered by something on the outside, the nature nurture principle that a lot of us don't really know. But man, I just want to let you know, Danielle, this has been, you know, your transparency and the deliverance has been amazing. When you came to our church and spoke you know, back in, I believe it was March, you know, you blew the minds of a lot of the people there. And I think of what God has in store for you. And I'm grateful that you came on our show, because today it was the last minute. And I'm grateful that I could call you and say, daughter, I need you to be on the show today.
I'll be right there.
They would, and then you said, I'm coming to the house. I'm coming to the studio and do it with you. And I'm just so excited and pleased that you came out. You know, and you know, I meant to say it was interactive, but there were a lot of people that were posting on Facebook and saying some great things. And you know, so those of you who've been listening in on the show, we're so grateful for your participation. I know Lowe's is boarding the plane right now, coming back home to be with his wife and family, and I'm so excited. You know, we're going to be doing the show next Saturday instead of Sunday. The show will be next Saturday at 7:00 p.m. to 8:30. so that we can be at his award ceremony on Sunday. So again, next Saturday, we will be filming the podcast next week on Saturday. On August 8th, we're hoping to get Pastor Wheeler back on August 8th. August 15th, we have Randy Clark will be here. And Randy Clark is just a powerful man. And he and my husband are friends, and they've been really talking about this time. And if anybody hasn't had an opportunity to read in Randy Clark's book, you need to get a hold of it and just look at the things that he's been doing. But Danielle, last words as we close out the show tonight. Tell me what is next for It's Her Time.
Oh my goodness. So believe it or not, as soon as I posted the flyer, one of the young ladies from my committee, we took a break. I'm not a big virtual person. I know I have to get with the times, but my ministry with It's Her Time is very soul touching. So I like the presence of the women to be there. I like to hug. I like to, feed off of everyone's spirit. So it's been difficult trying to kind of bend what I'm used to the virtual world. But it's funny because as soon as I posted this, one of the young ladies who's been with me, Taja, if you're watching, hey girl, she is a licensed mental health therapist, and she was like, Danielle, I've been meaning to tell you this is nothing but confirmation. We need to do a panel. We need to bring it to the church. We need to talk about this, especially amongst women. So we're going to be working on that. There's a book coming out.
Good.
There's a lot of things that we have in store that we're working on, and It's Her Time is coming back revamped, and I'm so excited.
And I can't wait.
I can't wait. And I'm going to be calling you to assist with some of the many events. We're going to be doing small events each season to lead up to the annual conference. So awesome. I'm really excited. I'm really, really excited about it. Yes.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed our show today, and you enjoyed my beautiful goddaughter, Danielle Amaris Owens. I'm going to call her Danielle Patrice Owens. Yeah. But truly, it's been a blessing to have you on the show.
Been a blessing.
I know your godfather is proud. I know he's excited that you joined in today. He was texting me, what are we going to do? And I said, we're going to make it happen. And he was telling me all the things to say. And I said, I've been watching this show for 367 or 370 shows. I think I can handle it today. Right. I hope you all think I could handle it today.
You did a wonderful job.
But we're grateful. And so we want to say thank you so very much, everyone, for joining and participating with us. And we also want to continue to shout out the New York, our NYPVG, our wonderful producers that have been doing a great job with us each and every show. And so hope you have a good week. Do something on purpose.
On purpose.
Do something on purpose.
Yes.
Make magic happen. God bless you. May heaven smile upon you. Thank you for the blue.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Lowe's More, the Blueprint Podcast. Stay connected and follow us at our website, www.lowesmore.com. That's LOWESMOORE.com. You can also join the discussion on Twitter at Lowe's More and on Facebook at Lowe's More Jr. As always, thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to stay fully up to date with everything we're up to. Until next time, be kind to yourself and each other.
What they teaching is a joke. I ain't buying it like I'm broke. Insufficient funds for insignificant.